L85 was once one of the most feared figures inside CJNG. Then he simply vanished. No arrest, no confirmed death, no trace. Interpol returns nothing. No active warrant, no sealed indictment. A man who reportedly commanded El Mencho's entire eastern zone, controlled a 20% revenue share, and took 30 distribution cells with him when he broke from one of the most dangerous cartels on Earth. And somehow no government on the planet can tell you where he is. The question isn't just where he's hiding. It's how someone this powerful became invisible. Interpol's database returns a blank. No red notice. No criminal registration number. Mexican court dockets offer nothing. No sealed indictment. No open arrest warrant. Not even a forfeiture order. In the official record, L85 does not exist. Warrant checks with the Mexican Attorney General's office yield no results under his most widely reported aliases. Not one entry appears for Mario Gomez Lopez, Jorge Ramirez Marquez, or any variation tied to the moniker L85. The absence stretches beyond Mexico. The United States Department of Justice lists dozens of cartel figures, but his name is missing from any public indictment. No asset seizures, no extradition requests, no mention in the Drug Enforcement Administration annual threat assessment. Journalists have tried to follow the paper trail, combing through municipal arrest logs, cross-checking Sedena raid bulletins, and searching for leaked intelligence memos. Each attempt ends in the same void. The few stories that surface cite only anonymous sources or cartel analysts, never a police report or official statement. Rumors of sightings, an abandoned warehouse in Mazatlan. A tip from a border informant. Fade in the absence of any supporting documentation. Even the most basic forensic evidence is missing. No CCTV stills, no satellite captures of convoy movements, no forensic reports naming seized weapons or encrypted phones. The usual hallmarks of a high-value manhunt, publicized reward posters, press conferences, and digital wanted lists, are nowhere to be found. For a man who supposedly fractured one of the world's most powerful cartels, the silence in the official record is deafening. The question lingers. How does a figure of this magnitude vanish so completely without leaving even a single piece of paper behind? Érick Valencia Salazar is the man behind the alias L85. His birth is recorded in the Guadalajara Civil Registry on January 13, 1985, under the names José Valencia Gomez and María Salazar López. This is the only legal identity that reliably connects to the figure known as L85. Despite years of rumors about alternate names, forged documents, or possible dual citizenship, U.S. Department of Justice records confirm this identity, naming Érick Valencia Salazar as a co-founder of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, and labeling him a principal narcotics trafficker in a federal indictment filed in Washington, D.C. No other aliases, no Mario Gomez Lopez, no Jorge Ramirez Marquez appear in any official Mexican or U.S. court filings that can be linked to the operational activities attributed to L85. The nickname itself, L85, is not a random code. It is drawn directly from his birth year, a detail that surfaces in early Mexican investigative files and is echoed in internal cartel communications intercepted by federal law enforcement. Another moniker, El Matazetas, refers to his reputation as a Zeta killer during the bloody cartel wars of the late 2000s. But the legal trail always leads back to the same birth certificate in Guadalajara. The Department of Justice indictment is the only public document that ties all these threads together. It lists Valencia Salazar as a founding member of CJNG, a direct subordinate to Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, and the architect of the cartel's logistics and enforcement structure. No credible evidence points to any other legal identity. Even the rumors of a U.S. passport or alternate citizenship remain unsubstantiated in the public record. The man known as L85, the figure who would later shake the foundations of CJNG, is at his core Érick Valencia Salazar. Born in Guadalajara, raised in Jalisco, and known to authorities on both sides of the border by that name alone. Inside the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, L85's domain was logistics, an empire built on control of movement, supply, and revenue. His command stretched across the so-called Eastern Zone, centered in Guadalajara, with reach into Zapopan and the main transport arteries of Jalisco. The apparatus functioned like a corporation. Shipments of cocaine and methamphetamine flowed from Pacific ports through a web of warehouses, clandestine airstrips, and safe houses. Every container, every truck, every kilo was tracked by his lieutenants. Local plaza bosses answered to him, and municipal police commanders in Tlajomulco and Tonala were reportedly on his payroll, smoothing the passage of convoys and warning of federal raids. The financial structure reflected his importance. Internal payment records leaked to Mexican media show that L85 received a 20% cut of all Eastern Zone revenues, second only to El Mencho's 30%. This was not just a slice of drug profits. His share included extortion payments from businesses, oil theft proceeds, and the municipal protection fees imposed on small shops and avocado growers. Under his watch, the Rancho El Coyote operation near Tlajomulco alone generated an estimated $150 million a year in stolen fuel, laundered through construction fronts and cryptocurrency mixers. Weapons procurement ran through his network as well. Arms shipments, everything from AR-15 rifles to military-grade drones, passed through Manzanillo's container terminal, with customs officials bribed to look the other way. The logistics chain was so efficient that DEA analysts credited L85 with orchestrating the flow of precursor chemicals from China, feeding clandestine labs that produced tons of meth and fentanyl bound for the United States. Losing him meant losing the central switchboard for CJNG's most lucrative corridors. The structure he built was more than a pipeline. It was the backbone of the cartel's financial and operational power. Inside CJNG's inner circle, loyalty was more than a word. It was the currency that bought survival. Érick Valencia Salazar, known as L85, owed his rapid ascent to a bond with Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, better known as El Mencho. Their connection ran deeper than business. Both men came from the same region of Jalisco, and their families were intertwined by a web of distant cousinship and marriages, a fact that Mexican intelligence files quietly flagged as a reason for Valencia's early access to the cartel's highest councils. El Mencho, a former municipal police officer turned cartel strategist, saw in Valencia a rare combination: unflinching loyalty, a knack for logistics, and a willingness to enforce discipline with absolute ruthlessness. Within the original cadre that broke from the Milenio Cartel, Valencia was one of just 3 men trusted to sit at the table when major decisions were made. Internal memos intercepted by federal authorities show that El Mencho referred to him as mi mano derecha, which means his right hand. This was not just a figure of speech. Valencia was allowed to approve new recruits, resolve disputes among plaza bosses, and even sign off on large-scale weapon purchases. The nickname L85 itself, drawn from his birth year, became a shorthand for authority, and among lieutenants, a direct order from L85 carried the same weight as one from El Mencho. This trust was reinforced by history. During the bloody years after the Milenio split, both men survived assassination attempts and betrayals that wiped out other founding members. They traveled together, negotiated with rival cartels, and reportedly shared safe houses when federal pressure was at its peak. For a time, their alliance was the backbone of CJNG's expansion, with Valencia's grip on logistics and Mencho's command of violence forming a partnership that few dared to challenge. But in a world where power is always provisional, even the closest bonds can crack under the strain of ambition and suspicion. A single document upended the balance inside CJNG. In late 2017, a revenue allocation memo surfaced among senior leadership, listing the precise contributions of each distribution cell to the cartel's central treasury. The memo-stamped confidential Q4 revealed a pattern. Cells loyal to L85 were consistently reporting lower payments than expected, with a gap averaging 12% compared to other zones. This was not a minor discrepancy. The sums involved ran into tens of millions of pesos each month, enough to fund paramilitary squads or bribe entire police units. Within days, word of the leak spread through encrypted channels. El Mencho called an emergency meeting in Zapopan, summoning plaza bosses and trusted lieutenants. The confrontation was direct. Mencho demanded explanations for the missing revenue, while L85's inner circle insisted the numbers reflected real costs, higher bribes, lost shipments, and local taxes. But the memo's details were too precise, naming specific safe houses, shipment dates, and bank accounts tied to L85's network. Pressure mounted as rumors swirled of federal investigations and possible informants. A series of arrests followed. 3 mid-level commanders from L85's faction were detained by municipal police and handed over to federal authorities, their names appearing days later in Sedena bulletins. The arrests deepened suspicions of betrayal. In the weeks that followed, alliances fractured. Cell leaders loyal to L85 began withdrawing from CJNG meetings, refusing to forward cash, and quietly relocating their operations. The rupture had begun, not with gunfire, but with a memo that made loyalty a liability and exposed the hidden mechanics of defection. 30 distribution cells didn't just vanish from CJNG's payroll, they reconstituted under L85's signal, shifting the very architecture of cartel power nearly overnight. Each cell brought its own network, plaza bosses, extortion collectors, trusted drivers, and municipal police contacts. Internal ledgers recovered by U.S. prosecutors show that these cells accounted for more than 1/3 of CJNG's regional cash flow in western Mexico. The defection wasn't a trickle. It was a coordinated migration of personnel, safe houses, and logistical assets. Warehouse keys changed hands in Michoacan and Guanajuato. Convoys began rerouting around Guadalajara, guided by lieutenants who had once reported to El Mencho, but now answered only to Valencia. Surveillance logs from late 2018 track a string of warehouse relocations, first in Zamora, then in Apatzingán, each accompanied by a sudden drop in shipments through CJNG's old corridors and a spike in activity along new routes. In intercepted radio traffic, code words once reserved for CJNG's Central Command now identified Valencia's faction as the new authority. The reach of these breakaway cells extended beyond drug shipments. Extortion collectors, who enforced municipal protection fees on avocado growers and construction sites, began remitting payments to Valencia's new treasury. Police liaisons, particularly in Tlajomulco and Uracuaro, shifted their allegiances, providing advance warning of federal raids and facilitating the movement of arms. The scale of the transfer was so comprehensive that, for a brief window, Mencho's organization lost operational visibility over entire stretches of Jalisco and Michoacan. This wasn't just a loss of manpower, it was a transfer of institutional memory, trusted communication codes, and the everyday mechanics that kept the cartel's engine running. The claim that L85 took half the cartel is rooted in these numbers: 30 distribution cells, dozens of police liaisons, and a revenue stream that for months bypassed CJNG's central treasury entirely. CJNG's response was immediate and brutal. Within hours of the first confirmed defection, armed convoys rolled out from safe houses in Zapopan and Tonala. These were not random retaliation squads. They were hand-picked, veteran enforcers, many drawn from the Los Aguilas unit, a covert branch tasked with internal discipline. Their orders were simple: hunt down any cell leader suspected of siding with L85, reclaim lost warehouses, and re-establish the flow of cash to the central treasury. The purges began in Jalisco's smaller towns. In Tizapan and La Barca, 2 plaza bosses were found executed, their bodies left with warning notes referencing loyalty to El Mencho. By the end of the week, at least 6 more mid-level commanders disappeared without a trace. Municipal police, many still on CJNG's payroll, either looked the other way or quietly passed along lists of suspected defectors. The message spread quickly. No one was untouchable. At the same time, CJNG's leadership convened a closed-door summit in Guadalajara. Trusted lieutenants were reassigned overnight. Plaza bosses, once loyal to L85, were replaced by men with direct ties to El Mencho's family. Financial controllers were rotated, and a new layer of security was imposed on all cash movements. The cartel's internal communications shifted to fresh encryption protocols, and courier networks were restructured to limit leaks. Covert hunt squads fanned out beyond Jalisco, tracking fleeing defectors into Michoacan and Guanajuato. These teams operated without uniforms or insignia, blending into civilian traffic, and often relying on tips from informants incentivized with cash or protection. The purges and reshuffles sent ripples through the entire region as alliances were tested and old loyalties dissolved under the threat of sudden violence. For those who stayed, survival meant proving allegiance daily, while the map of cartel power began to redraw itself in blood. Maps of western Mexico, once dominated by a single color, now show a patchwork of contested ground. As L85's loyalists peeled away from CJNG, the old maritime corridor through Manzanillo fractured. Rival groups rushed to claim abandoned docks and rural airstrips. In Michoacan, new checkpoints sprang up overnight along Highway 15, each one flying a different flag. Municipal clashes erupted in Zamora and Apatzingan, with local police caught between shifting allegiances. Farmers in the avocado belt reported fewer demands for protection payments, a brief dip in extortion that signaled the confusion gripping the region's underworld. The old certainty, knowing which cartel controlled which street, vanished. Even the Pacific smuggling lanes saw new actors testing the waters, sending small boats into territory that had been off-limits for years. For families in Tlajomulco and Uricuaro, daily life became a series of anxious calculations: which plazas were safe, which roads to avoid, and who might be watching. The fallout from the split carved new borders, leaving communities to navigate a landscape where power could change hands by the hour. Los Madriles surfaced in the wake of the split, quickly filling the vacuum left by L85's exodus. Unlike CJNG's old top-down command, Los Madriles operated as a council, a loose alliance of former plaza bosses who once answered to Valencia. This collective approach allowed them to adapt, moving away from rigid hierarchies and experimenting with new revenue streams. Their operations extended across Sinaloa, Colima, and the Pacific Coast, where they established control over key smuggling nodes and diversified their income. Oil theft, once a side business, became a major pillar, with stolen fuel from Pemex pipelines funneled through rural hubs and laundered via construction fronts. Meanwhile, a new maritime strategy took shape. A fleet of catamarans and high-speed boats ran shipments from Manzanillo to Central American ports, bypassing overland choke points and making detection harder for authorities. L85's reinvented network, sometimes called La Fraternidad 85 by investigators, mirrored this innovation. Rather than relying solely on drug trafficking, the group branched into extortion, migrant smuggling, and cryptocurrency laundering. Central American outposts in Guatemala and Honduras served as staging grounds for both product and people, linking the Pacific routes to U.S. markets. The result was a multipolar landscape, no longer defined by a single cartel's dominance, but by smaller, agile factions capable of rapid adaptation. For authorities, this meant the manhunt for L-85 now spanned not just Mexico, but a web of transnational alliances and revenue streams that blurred the lines between old-school cartel operations and modern criminal entrepreneurship. Federal agencies launched audits at Pacific ports, freezing assets tied to shell companies and scanning manifests for hidden shipments, yet every sweep turned up empty. No bank accounts, no suspicious wire transfers, no paper trail leading to Érick Valencia Salazar. In the absence of a financial footprint, the manhunt shifted to intelligence work. Wire intercepts picked up bursts of encrypted radio chatter in Michoacán and Jalisco, but the messages vanished as quickly as they appeared. Three dominant theories surfaced among investigators. The first pointed to a fortified ranch in the Sierra Madre, a site shielded by armed loyalists and supported by local officials on the take. The second focused on border cities in the United States Southwest, where cash deposits to anonymous limited liability companies hinted at a false identity and cross-border mobility. The third, more shadowy, suggested safe harbor under the protection of Sinaloa operatives, trading silence for expertise. Police collusion complicated every lead. Municipal commanders in Zamora and Tlajomulco routinely tipped off targets before raids, and leaked checkpoint schedules made surveillance nearly impossible. Each failed operation left authorities chasing ghosts, while encrypted communications and shifting alliances kept the real location of L-85 just out of reach. The pursuit continues, but with every unanswered call and empty safehouse, certainty slips further away. Today, cartel fractures like this fuel unpredictable violence across Mexico. Splinter groups battle for power, while authorities remain steps behind. L-85's disappearance is more than a mystery. It is a symptom of a landscape where leadership can vanish, but chaos persists. As rivalries deepen and alliances shift, the true cost falls on communities caught in the crossfire. The shadows left behind don't stay empty for long. Share your thoughts below.